My name is Christopher, and I'm 45 years old. I've been married to Sarah for 12 years, and I thought I knew her pretty well. We live in a modest two-bedroom apartment in Denver, Colorado, where the autumn air carries the scent of pine from the nearby mountains. I work as an IT consultant for a mid-sized firm downtown, pulling in decent money that allows us to live comfortably without being extravagant. Sarah works part-time at a local boutique, something she enjoys because it keeps her connected to fashion trends. Her salary isn't substantial, but it covers her personal expenses and contributes to our grocery budget. We've always maintained separate personal accounts for discretionary spending, while our joint account handles rent, utilities, and our emergency fund. That emergency fund was my pride and joy. Over 5 years, I'd carefully built it up to $15,000. Every month, I'd transfer $250 from my paycheck, sometimes more when I landed a good consulting gig. Sarah knew about it, supported it even. We'd talked about how it would cover us if I lost my job, or if we had a medical emergency, or if the car broke down. It was a Tuesday evening in late October when everything unraveled. The apartment felt unusually quiet when I got home from work. Sarah was in the bedroom and I could hear her moving around, but something felt different. The living room looked the same. Our worn leather couch facing the TV, the small dining table where we ate most of our meals, family photos scattered on the mantel above our electric fireplace. "Hey honey, I'm home," I called out, loosening my tie. The consulting project I'd been working on was particularly demanding, and I was looking forward to a quiet evening. "Hi, Chris," Sarah's voice came from the bedroom, but it sounded strained, almost nervous. I walked to our small kitchen and opened the refrigerator, pulling out a beer. That's when I noticed several large shopping bags near the front door that I hadn't seen when I walked in. Designer bags. I recognized the distinctive patterns even from a distance. Louis Vuitton, Gucci, Chanel. My stomach dropped. "Sarah," I called, walking toward the bedroom. "What are those bags by the door?" She appeared in the doorway, her blonde hair perfectly styled, wearing a new dress I didn't recognize. Her blue eyes, usually bright and welcoming, looked guilty and defiant at the same time. "Oh, those," she said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I had a really good day shopping. There was this amazing sale and I found some incredible pieces." "Sale?" I walked over to examine the bags more closely. The receipts were still inside some of them. My hands trembled as I pulled out the first one. $3,000 for a handbag. Another receipt showed $2,800 for shoes. The numbers kept climbing as I went through bag after bag. "Sarah, how much did you spend?" My voice was barely above a whisper. She crossed her arms defensively. "It's not that much when you consider the original prices. I saved thousands with these discounts." "That's not what I asked." I was still holding the receipts, the paper crinkling in my increasingly tight grip. "How much did you spend total?" The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Outside, I could hear the distant hum of traffic on Colfax Avenue and the sound of children playing in the courtyard below. Our apartment suddenly felt smaller, more cramped. 14,000, she finally whispered. The beer bottle slipped from my other hand, hitting the hardwood floor with a sharp crack, but somehow not breaking. The sound echoed in our small space. $14,000? I repeated, my voice rising. "Sarah, where did you get $14,000? Her silence was answer enough, but I needed to hear it. "The emergency fund," she said, not meeting my eyes. "I was going to tell you, but then I found such good deals, and I thought maybe I could sell some of them for a profit and—" "You spent our entire emergency fund on purses and shoes." The words came out louder than I intended, and I saw her flinch. "They're not just purses, Chris, they're investment pieces. Some of these bags actually appreciate in value over time." I stared at her, this woman I'd shared a bed with for over a decade, and felt like I was looking at a stranger. The emergency fund represented security, stability, responsibility. It was our safety net, carefully built dollar by dollar, and she had blown it all in one afternoon on luxury items we couldn't afford. "I can't believe this," I said, running my hands through my hair. "Sarah, that money was for emergencies, real emergencies. What if I lose my job? What if one of us gets sick?" "You're being dramatic," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Nothing's going to happen." Your job is secure, we're both healthy. That's not the point, I was shouting now, and I could hear our neighbor's TV volume decrease. They were probably listening. The point is that we agreed that money was off limits, unless we both decided it was necessary. Sarah's expression shifted from guilty to angry. I work too, Chris. I contribute to this household. I should have a say in how we spend our money. Our money? Sarah, you spent more than you make in an entire year in one day. The apartment fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the wall clock in the kitchen. I looked around our modest home, at the furniture we'd bought piece by piece over the years, at the walls we'd painted together the previous spring, at the life we'd built. Everything felt different now, tainted by this betrayal. I need some air, I said, grabbing my jacket from the closet. Chris, wait, Sarah called after me. But I was already heading for the door. I walked the streets of our neighborhood for 2 hours, past the coffee shop where Sarah and I had our first date, past the park where we talked about our future, past the grocery store where we did our weekly shopping together. The October evening was crisp, and the streetlights cast long shadows on the sidewalks. Denver's skyline glittered in the distance, but I felt more alone than I had in years. When I finally returned home, the designer bags were gone from the front door, moved to our bedroom. Sarah was in the kitchen making tea, chamomile, the kind she drank when she was stressed. We need to talk about this rationally, she said without looking up. I sat down at our small dining table, the same table where we'd planned our budget every month, where we'd dreamed about saving for a house, where we'd celebrated small financial victories. Okay, I said. Let's talk. How are we going to get that money back? What do you mean? I mean, how are we going to return those bags and shoes and get our emergency fund back? Sarah's face went pale. I can't return them. Most of them were final sale, and some of them I already used. The weight of our situation settled over me like a heavy blanket. $14,000 gone. Our financial security destroyed. And my wife, the woman I trusted most in the world, sitting across from me acting like this was somehow reasonable. Then we have a problem, I said quietly. A big problem. The next morning I woke up before my alarm, something that rarely happened. Sarah was still asleep beside me, her hair spread across the pillow, looking peaceful despite the chaos she'd created. For a moment, I almost forgot about the previous evening. Then I saw the corner of a Chanel bag peeking out from her side of the closet, and reality came crashing back. I made coffee in our small kitchen, the same routine I'd followed for years, but everything felt different. The morning light streaming through our windows seemed harsher, and even the familiar sounds of our neighborhood waking up felt foreign. I sat at the dining table with my laptop, opening our online banking to confirm what I already knew. Emergency fund, $47, 32. The number stared back at me from the screen. $47.32, from $15,000 to essentially nothing. I closed the laptop and rubbed my temples, feeling a headache building behind my eyes. Morning, Sarah's voice came from behind me. She was wearing one of my old college t-shirts, something that usually made her look cute and approachable. Today, it just reminded me of how much our lives had become intertwined, making this betrayal hurt even more. Morning, I replied without turning around. She moved around the kitchen making her own coffee, the silence between us heavy and uncomfortable. Outside, Mrs. Peterson from next door was walking her terrier, the same routine we'd watched from our window for 3 years. Everything looked normal from the outside, but inside our apartment, our marriage felt like it was balancing on a knife's edge. Chris, Sarah said finally, sitting down across from me. I know you're angry, but... Angry? I looked up at her. Sarah, angry doesn't begin to cover what I'm feeling right now. Her blue eyes filled with tears, but I found myself feeling less sympathetic than I expected. I messed up, okay? I admit it. But we can figure this out. How? I leaned back in my chair. How exactly do we figure out the fact that you spent our entire emergency fund without telling me? I could try to sell some of the pieces. There are websites where you can sell designer items. For how much? Half of what you paid, a third. She looked down at her coffee mug. I don't know. I opened my laptop again and pulled up our monthly budget spreadsheet. Let me show you something, I said, turning the screen toward her. This is our monthly budget. After rent, utilities, car payment, insurance, groceries, and minimum payments on our credit cards, we have about $400 left over each month. That's what we were using to rebuild our emergency fund. Sarah studied the numbers, her expression growing more troubled. At $400 a month, I continued, it would take us 3 years to rebuild what you spent in one day. 3 years, Sarah. And that's assuming nothing goes wrong during that time. Maybe I could pick up more hours at the boutique, she offered weakly. You make $12 an hour part-time. To earn back $14,000, you'd need to work an extra 23 hours a week for a year. Does the boutique even have that many hours available? The math was brutal, but it was reality. I'd learned to be practical about money from my father, who'd worked 2 jobs to support our family after my mother got sick when I was a teenager. Money wasn't just numbers on a screen. It was security, stability, peace of mind. Sarah was crying now, quietly, tears rolling down her cheeks. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry, Chris. I don't know what I was thinking. That's just it, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. You weren't thinking. You were feeling. You saw pretty things and you wanted them, and you took our security to get them. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from my boss asking if I could come in early for a client meeting. Under normal circumstances, I would have been annoyed. Today, I was almost grateful for the distraction. I have to go to work, I said, closing the laptop and standing up. Chris, please, can we talk about this more tonight? I looked at her sitting at our table in my old t-shirt, surrounded by the remnants of our normal life, and felt a wave of sadness wash over me. This was the woman I'd fallen in love with, the woman I'd planned to buy a house with, maybe start a family with. But trust, once broken, wasn't something you could just piece back together with apologies. I don't know what there is to talk about, I said. The money's gone, the damage is done. The drive to work through Denver's morning traffic gave me time to think, but thinking was the last thing I wanted to do. I tried to focus on the familiar sights, the downtown skyline, the mountains in the distance, the coffee shops and restaurants where Sarah and I had made memories. But every familiar landmark now felt tainted with uncertainty. At the office, I threw myself into work with an intensity that surprised my colleagues. I scheduled back-to-back meetings, dove into complex technical problems, and volunteered for projects that I would normally have delegated. Anything to keep my mind off the disaster waiting for me at home. You okay, Chris? Asked my colleague Mike during lunch. You seem pretty intense today. Just trying to stay busy, I replied, not looking up from my computer. Mike was a good friend, someone I'd worked with for 5 years. He knew Sarah had been to our apartment for dinner parties. Under normal circumstances, I might have confided in him. But this felt too personal, too humiliating to share. Around 3 in the afternoon, my phone rang. Sarah's name appeared on the screen and I debated whether to answer. Part of me hoped she was calling to say she'd found a way to return everything, that this nightmare was over. But I knew better. Hi, I answered. Chris, I've been looking into those resale websites, she said, her voice bright with forced optimism. Some of these pieces might actually sell for close to what I paid. Might? Well, there's no guarantee, and it could take months to find buyers. But it's something. I closed my eyes, feeling the headache that had been building all day intensify. Sarah, even if you could sell everything for exactly what you paid, which we both know isn't going to happen, we're still back to square one. No emergency fund, no security. But at least we wouldn't be in debt. We're not in debt because I've been careful with our money for years, because I've made sacrifices to build up that fund, because I've said no to things I wanted so we could have financial security. The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. I know, she said finally. I know you've been responsible. I know I messed up. Sarah, this isn't just about messing up. This is about trust. This is about partnership. We're supposed to make financial decisions together, especially big ones. I didn't plan it, she said, her voice getting defensive again. I went to the mall to look around, and there was this sale, and one thing led to another. $14,000 doesn't happen by accident. That's not impulse buying, that's a deliberate choice to spend money you knew wasn't yours to spend. After I hung up, I sat in my office cubicle staring at the framed photo of Sarah and me from our honeymoon in Cabo. We looked so happy, so optimistic about our future together. I remembered how carefully we'd budgeted for that trip, how proud we'd been to pay for it without going into debt. The rest of the workday dragged by, but eventually I had to go home. The apartment felt different when I walked in. Not because anything had physically changed, but because I was seeing it through new eyes. Everything here was the result of careful planning and budgeting. The couch we'd saved for months to buy. The dining table we'd found at a yard sale and refinished together. The TV we'd purchased with a bonus from my job. Sarah was in the kitchen making dinner, spaghetti with meat sauce, one of my favorites. The smell was comforting and familiar, but it felt like she was trying too hard to pretend everything was normal. "How was work?" she asked, not quite meeting my eyes. "Fine," I replied, hanging my jacket in the closet. "How was your day?" I listed 3 of the bags on different websites, and I called a consignment shop downtown. They might be interested in some of the shoes. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The practical part of me appreciated that she was trying to fix the situation, but the emotional part of me was still reeling from the betrayal. We ate dinner in near silence, the only sounds the clinking of silverware against plates and the distant noise of traffic outside. This was supposed to be our safe space, our refuge from the world. Now it felt like a battlefield where we were both afraid to make the wrong move. After dinner, I retreated to the living room with my laptop to work on a freelance project. Sarah cleaned the kitchen and then disappeared into the bedroom. Around 10 o'clock, she emerged wearing pajamas, looking like she wanted to say something but wasn't sure how to start. "Chris," she said finally, "I know I hurt you, I know I broke your trust, but we've been together for 12 years. Doesn't that count for something?" I looked up from my laptop. "Of course it counts." "But Sarah, this isn't just about the money. It's about who I thought you were versus who you apparently are." "What do you mean?" "I thought you were someone who shared my values. Someone who understood that financial security matters more than designer handbags. Someone who would never make a major financial decision without consulting me." She sat down on the other end of the couch, maintaining distance between us. "I am that person. I just made a mistake. A $14,000 mistake. People make mistakes, Chris, even big ones." I closed the laptop and turned to face her fully. "Sarah, when I was 16, my dad lost his job at the factory. We had no emergency fund, no savings. I watched my parents stress about every bill, every grocery trip, every unexpected expense. My mom cried herself to sleep worrying about losing our house. That's why financial security is so important to me. It's not about the money itself. It's about never feeling that helpless again." Sarah's eyes filled with tears again. "I didn't know it was so personal for you." "How could you not know? We've been together for 12 years. You've met my parents. You know what they went through. I knew, but I didn't connect it to this." The distance between us on the couch felt like miles. I wanted to comfort her, to fix this somehow, but I also felt like I was looking at a stranger. The woman I'd married wouldn't have done this. Or maybe she would have, and I'd just been blind to that possibility. "I think I need some space," I said quietly. "What kind of space?" "I don't know yet. I just know that right now, I can't look at you without thinking about what you did, and that's not fair to either of us." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implications. Sarah nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. "Are you leaving me?" she whispered. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I really don't know." 3 days later, our landlord called. His name was Mr. Rodriguez, and he was generally a reasonable man who'd been our landlord for 4 years. We'd never been late with rent, never caused problems, never given him a reason to worry about us as tenants. "Christopher," he said when I answered the phone during my lunch break, "I need to talk to you about next month's rent." My stomach dropped. In all the chaos of the past few days, I'd completely forgotten that rent was due in 2 weeks. Rent that came out of our checking account, which was now dangerously low thanks to Sarah's shopping spree. "What about it?" I asked, though I already knew. "The payment was declined this morning when my property management company tried to process it. Your account has insufficient funds." I closed my eyes and leaned back in my office chair. Of course, Sarah hadn't just emptied our emergency fund, she'd overdrafted our checking account in the process. "I'm sorry, Mr. Rodriguez. There was a banking error. I'll get it sorted out today." "I hope so, Christopher. You and Sarah have been good tenants, but I can't make exceptions for late rent. If I don't receive payment by the 5th of the month, I'll have to start the eviction process." After hanging up, I immediately called our bank. The automated system confirmed what I already suspected. Our checking account was overdrawn by nearly $300. Sarah's spending had exceeded even what I'd thought. I called Sarah immediately. "Chris?" she answered on the first ring, her voice hopeful. "Sarah, our rent payment bounced. We're overdrawn by $300. The silence on the other end was deafening. "I thought you only spent the emergency fund money," I continued, my voice eerily calm despite the panic rising in my chest. I did. Mostly. There were just a couple of small things that I put on the debit card. A couple of small things that added up to $300 over our account balance. I guess I lost track of how much was in checking versus how much was in the emergency fund. I was sitting in my car in the parking garage beneath my office building, and the concrete walls felt like they were closing in on me. "Sarah, we could lose our apartment." "What do you mean?" "I mean, if we can't pay rent, we get evicted. Do you understand that?" "But you get paid on Friday. Can't we just pay it then?" "My paycheck is $2,300 after taxes. Rent is $1,800. That leaves us $500 for everything else. Groceries, utilities, car payment, insurance, minimum credit card payments. We literally cannot afford to live if we don't have the emergency fund as a buffer." I could hear her crying on the other end of the line, but I felt strangely detached from her emotion. The practical reality of our situation was overwhelming everything else. "What are we going to do?" she whispered. "I don't know. I honestly don't know." That evening, I sat at our dining table with a calculator, our bank statements and a legal pad, trying to figure out how to dig us out of the hole Sarah had created. The numbers were brutal. Even if Sarah could somehow sell all of her purchases for exactly what she'd paid, which was impossible, we were still looking at months of financial instability. Sarah hovered in the kitchen, making tea and toast she didn't eat, occasionally glancing at me but not speaking. The silence between us had become our new normal, a heavy presence that filled every corner of our small apartment. Around 8 o'clock, my phone rang. It was my brother David, calling from Phoenix where he worked as a financial advisor. "Hey, Chris," he said. "How are things?" David and I talked every few weeks, usually about work or sports or our parents. He had no idea about the crisis Sarah and I were facing. "Things are complicated," I said. "Complicated how?" I looked at Sarah, who was pretending to read a magazine at the kitchen counter, but was obviously listening to every word. "Can I call you back later?" I asked. "Sure. Everything okay?" "I'll call you later." After hanging up, I continued working on the numbers. No matter how I calculated it, we were in serious trouble. Even if I picked up extra freelance work, even if Sarah somehow doubled her hours at the boutique, we were looking at least 6 months of living paycheck to paycheck with no safety net. "Chris," Sarah said quietly from the kitchen, "can I ask you something?" "What?" "If I could somehow get the money back, all of it, would that fix things between us?" I looked up from my calculator. "What do you mean?" "I mean, is this about the money or is this about trust?" It was a fair question and one I'd been wrestling with myself. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Both, I think. Because if it's about the money, I could ask my parents for help." Sarah's parents lived in a wealthy suburb of Seattle. Her father was a successful lawyer, and her mother came from old money. They'd always been polite to me, but had made it clear they thought Sarah could have done better than an IT consultant from a working-class family. "Absolutely not," I said immediately. "Why not?" "Because this is our problem. Because I won't be indebted to your parents. Because they already think I'm not good enough for you. That's not true. Sarah, your mother literally asked me at our wedding reception if I was planning to better myself professionally." She winced at the memory. "She was just making conversation." "No, she was making a judgment, and if we go to them for money, it just proves her right." "So what's the alternative? Losing our apartment?" I set down my pen and looked at her. She was still beautiful. Still the woman I'd fallen in love with, but something fundamental had shifted between us. The partnership we'd built over 12 years felt fractured, maybe irreparably. "I could borrow from my 401k, I said finally. "Really? I could take out a loan against my retirement savings. It would cost us in penalties and interest, and it would set back our long-term financial goals by years, but it would solve the immediate crisis." Sarah's face lit up with relief, but I held up a hand. "But if I do that, things have to change drastically." "What do you mean?" "I mean, you need to prove to me that this will never happen again. Complete financial transparency. No more personal credit cards. No more solo shopping trips. Everything gets discussed and agreed upon." "That seems extreme." "Sarah, you spent our life savings on purses in one afternoon. Extreme is relative." She was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her processing what I was saying. Part of me hoped she would refuse, that she would show me this was who she really was, so I could make a clean decision about our marriage. But part of me hoped she would agree, that we could somehow rebuild what she'd broken. "Okay," she said finally. "Whatever you need." The next morning I called my 401k administrator and began the process of taking out a loan against my retirement savings. The representative explained the terms. I could borrow up to 50% of my vested balance, which was enough to cover the immediate crisis and give us a small cushion. But I'd be paying myself back with interest for the next 5 years. And if I lost my job before paying it back, the entire loan would become taxable income. "Are you sure about this?" the representative asked. "There might be other options." "I'm sure," I said, though I felt anything but sure. That afternoon, Sarah came home from the boutique with news. "I talked to my manager," she said, hanging her jacket in the closet. "She said she might have some extra hours for me during the holiday season. It's not permanent, but it would help." "How many hours?" "Maybe 10 or 15 extra per week from now through January." I did the math quickly in my head. Even at her hourly rate, that would only add a few $100s a month to our income. It was something, but it wasn't nearly enough to rebuild our financial security. "That's good," I said, trying to sound encouraging. "And I've been researching those resale websites more. Some of the bags I bought are actually selling for more than retail price online." "Sarah, I'm serious. Look at this." She pulled out her phone and showed me a listing for a bag similar to one she'd bought. The asking price was higher than what she'd paid. "That's the asking price," I said. "That doesn't mean anyone will pay it. But it's possible." I could see the hope in her eyes, the desperate need to believe that her mistake could somehow be turned into a victory. It was heartbreaking and infuriating at the same time. "Even if you could sell everything for a profit," I said gently, "which is incredibly unlikely, we've still lost months of financial progress. We've had to raid my retirement savings. We've put our housing situation at risk. I know all of that, but I'm trying to fix it. I appreciate that. But Sarah, fixing this isn't just about getting the money back. It's about understanding why you did it in the first place." She sat down at the dining table across from me, the same table where we'd had so many conversations about our future together. "I don't know why I did it," she said quietly. "I saw the sale and the bags were so beautiful, and I wanted them. I wanted to feel like the kind of person who could afford those things." "But you're not that kind of person." "We're not those kinds of people. We're the kind of people who save for 3 years to buy a decent couch. We're the kind of people who consider it a splurge to go out to dinner twice in 1 month." "I know. And I've always been okay with that. I thought I was happy with our life." "What changed?" She was quiet for a long moment, looking out the window at the Denver skyline in the distance. "I don't know," she said finally. "Maybe nothing changed. Maybe this is who I've always been, and I just hid it from myself." That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Sarah slept beside me. Her confession kept replaying in my head. Maybe this is who I've always been, and I just hid it from myself. If that was true, then who was the woman I'd married? And who was I for not seeing it? The 401k loan would solve our immediate financial crisis, but it wouldn't solve the deeper problem. Trust, once broken, wasn't something you could fix with money, and I was beginning to realize that the woman lying beside me might be someone I didn't really know at all. The 401k loan came through on a Thursday morning, depositing $18,000 into our checking account and temporarily solving our immediate crisis. I paid our rent, covered the overdraft fees, and put $5,000 into a new emergency fund. The rest would cover us for the next few months while we figured out our long-term situation. But having money in the bank again didn't fix the hollow feeling in my chest every time I looked at Sarah. She had managed to sell 2 of the designer bags through an online consignment site, recovering about 60% of what she'd paid for them. She presented this to me like a victory, showing me the payment confirmation on her phone with obvious pride. "See," she said, "I told you some of these would hold their value. You lost 40%, I pointed out, but I got something back. It's better than nothing." I nodded and tried to look pleased, but all I could think about was the fact that she still didn't seem to understand the magnitude of what she'd done. To her, getting back 60 cents on the dollar was a win. To me, it was just a smaller loss. 2 weeks later, on a Saturday morning in early November, everything came to a head in the most unexpected way. I was drinking coffee and reading the news on my laptop when Sarah emerged from the bedroom carrying a small gift box. "What's that?" I asked. "It's for you," she said, setting it down on the table in front of me. "An early Christmas present." I looked at the box suspiciously. It was small, elegant, from a jewelry store downtown that I knew was expensive. "Sarah, please tell me you didn't—" "Just open it," she said, sitting down across from me with an excited smile. Inside the box was a watch, not just any watch, but a Tag Heuer that I recognized from advertisements, the kind of watch that cost more than most people's monthly salary. "Do you like it?" she asked, her eyes bright with anticipation. I stared at the watch, then at my wife, then back at the watch. "How much did this cost?" "That's not important. It's a gift." "Sarah," my voice was deadly quiet, "how much did this cost?" Her smile faltered. "It was on sale." "How much?" $3,000. "But Chris, listen." I closed the box and set it down carefully on the table, my hands trembling with rage. "You spent $3,000 on a watch. I used my commission from selling the bags. It's my money." "Your money?" I stood up so abruptly that my chair almost fell over. "For your money that you got from selling bags you bought with our emergency fund. I wanted to do something nice for you. I wanted to show you that I was thinking about you. By spending $3,000 we don't have on something I don't need." Sarah's face crumpled, but I was beyond caring about her feelings. "I thought you'd like it. You always wear that old Casio, and I thought—" "I wear that old Casio because it works and because we can't afford a $3,000 watch. We just had to borrow from my retirement savings to keep our apartment, and you think the solution is to buy me expensive jewelry?" I was trying to make things better between us, by doing the exact same thing that caused the problem in the first place. The apartment fell silent, except for the ticking of the cheap wall clock in the kitchen, a clock that had kept perfect time for 3 years and cost $12. "Take it back," I said. "What?" "Take the watch back to the store and get our money back." "I can't. It was final sale." Of course it was. I sat back down heavily, feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. "Sarah, do you understand what you've done? Do you have any idea?" I was trying to be thoughtful. "You were trying to buy your way out of the consequences of your actions. You were trying to make yourself feel better about what you did." Sarah started crying, but this time I felt no urge to comfort her. Instead, I felt a strange sense of clarity, like fog lifting from my mind. "This isn't going to work," I said quietly. "What isn't going to work?" "Us. This marriage. You and me." The words hung in the air between us, and I realized that I'd known they were true for weeks but hadn't been able to admit it to myself. "Chris, no, please. It's just a watch. I'll figure out how to return it somehow." "It's not about the watch, Sarah. It's about the fact that 3 weeks after you nearly destroyed our financial security, you thought it was appropriate to spend $3,000 on a gift. It's about the fact that you still don't understand what you did wrong." "I do understand. I said I was sorry." "Sorry isn't enough anymore." I picked up the watch box and held it in my palm. "This watch represents everything that's wrong between us. You see a beautiful object and you want it, consequences be damned. You think money is for spending, not for security. You think sorry fixes everything. That's not fair, isn't it? I looked around our apartment, seeing it differently now. Sarah, we've been living different lives in the same space. I've been building toward our future, and you've been shopping for things to make yourself feel better in the moment. She was sobbing now, mascara running down her cheeks. I can change. I promise I can change. You bought me a $3,000 watch with money you got from selling bags you bought with our emergency fund. If that doesn't show you how deep this problem goes, nothing will. I walked to our bedroom and pulled out the suitcase we'd used for our honeymoon in Cabo. The same suitcase that had been carefully budgeted for, saved for, planned for months in advance. "What are you doing?" Sarah followed me, panic in her voice. "I'm going to stay at my brother's place for a while." "Chris, please don't leave. We can work this out." I started packing clothes, my movements mechanical and deliberate. "Sarah, I've been thinking about this for weeks. Every time I look at you, I wonder what other financial decisions you've made without telling me. Every time we talk about money, I feel like I'm talking to someone who speaks a different language. I'll get rid of all the bags, I'll sell everything, I'll get a second job. It's not about the bags anymore." I folded my work shirts carefully, the same way I'd been folding them for 12 years. "It's about trust, it's about partnership. It's about the fact that you think a $3,000 watch is an appropriate apology for destroying our financial security." Sarah sat on the bed watching me pack, her tears flowing freely. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," I said, and I meant it. But love isn't enough when we have completely different values about something as fundamental as money. "Money isn't everything, Chris." I stopped packing and looked at her. "You're right, money isn't everything, but financial responsibility is, trust is, partnership is, and right now, we don't have any of those things. We could get counseling. We could work on it. Could we?" I sat down on the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted. "Sarah, be honest with me. If you won the lottery tomorrow, what would you do?" "I don't know." "Why?" "Because I do know. You'd go shopping. You'd buy a bigger apartment, designer clothes, expensive jewelry, fancy cars. You'd spend it. What's wrong with that?" "Nothing, if that's what we both wanted. But I'd invest most of it. I'd set up college funds for kids we don't even have yet. I'd make sure we were financially secure for the rest of our lives. We'd have completely different priorities." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "So, you're saying we're incompatible?" "I'm saying that this situation has shown me something about you that I never saw before. Or maybe I saw it and chose to ignore it." "What?" "You value things more than security. You value immediate gratification more than long-term planning. And you make major decisions based on emotions rather than logic. Those aren't necessarily bad things. They're not bad things in general, but they're incompatible with the kind of life I want to build." I finished packing and zipped up the suitcase. The sound was final, decisive. "So that's it?" Sarah asked. 12 years and you're just giving up?" "I'm not giving up, I'm accepting reality." I picked up the suitcase and looked around our bedroom one last time. "Sarah, I wanted to build a life with you. I wanted to buy a house together, save for retirement together, maybe have kids together. But I can't do any of that with someone I don't trust with money. Trust can be rebuilt. Can it? Because right now, sitting here talking to you, I'm wondering what other purchases you've made that I don't know about. I'm wondering if there are credit cards I haven't seen, or if you've borrowed money from friends, or if you've been hiding spending from me for years." Sarah's face went pale. "There's nothing else, I swear. But the fact that I'm wondering about it tells you everything you need to know about where we are." I walked toward the front door, my footsteps echoing in our small apartment. Sarah followed me, still crying. "Chris, please, don't do this. We can figure it out." I turned to face her one last time. "The emergency fund took me 5 years to build. 5 years of saying no to things I wanted, of working extra hours, of being responsible. You destroyed it in one afternoon. And then you tried to apologize with a $3,000 watch." I shook my head. "I can't live like that, Sarah. I won't live like that." "What about the lease? What about our life here?" "Keep the apartment if you can afford it. My name's on the lease too, so I'll help with rent until we can figure out the legal stuff. But I can't live here anymore." "Are you filing for divorce?" The question hung in the air between us. I hadn't consciously made that decision yet, but hearing her ask it made me realize that's where this was heading. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I need time to think." "How much time?" "I don't know that either." I opened the front door and stepped into the hallway. The same hallway where we'd kissed after our first date in this apartment 4 years ago. The same hallway where we'd carried in furniture, piece by piece, as we built our life together. "Chris," Sarah called after me, "I'm sorry." "I'm so sorry." I turned back to look at her standing in our doorway, still beautiful, still the woman I'd fallen in love with, but somehow a stranger. "I know you are," I said. "But sorry doesn't fix this. Some things can't be fixed, Sarah. Some things can only be learned from." The drive to David's house in the suburbs took 45 minutes through Saturday afternoon traffic. Denver looked different from behind the wheel of my car, with my life packed in a suitcase in the back seat. The mountains in the distance, usually a source of comfort and beauty, seemed indifferent to my personal crisis. David answered the door with a surprised smile that quickly faded when he saw my expression and the suitcase. "Chris, what's going on? Can I stay here for a while? I'll explain everything, but I just need a place to think." "Of course. Come in." David's house was everything Sarah and I had been saving toward. A 3-bedroom ranch with a 2-car garage and a backyard where his kids played. He'd achieved it through careful financial planning, steady career growth, and partnership with his wife, Linda. Everything I'd thought Sarah and I were building toward. That evening, I told David and Linda the whole story. They listened without judgment, asked practical questions, offered support. Linda made dinner while David and I sat on his back porch drinking beer and watching his kids play on their swing set. "So, what are you going to do?" David asked. "I honestly don't know. Part of me thinks I should try to make it work. 12 years is a long time to throw away. But I keep thinking about that watch. 3 weeks after she almost destroyed our financial security, she spent $3,000 on a watch. What does that tell you about her priorities?" David was quiet for a moment. "It tells me she doesn't understand money the way you do. Is that something you can learn, or is it just who you are?" "I think it can be learned, but the person has to want to learn. They have to see why it matters. And if they don't, then you have to decide if you can live with that." That night, lying in David's guest room, I stared at the ceiling and thought about the choices ahead of me. I could go back to Sarah, insist on financial counseling, hope that she could change fundamental aspects of who she was, or I could accept that we were incompatible in a way that mattered more than love. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "I returned the watch. They gave me store credit, but I'm going to sell it online and put the money toward the emergency fund. I love you." Store credit. Even in trying to fix her mistake, she'd managed to make another one. Store credit meant the money was trapped at that jewelry store, useless for building emergency funds or paying bills. I turned off my phone without responding and closed my eyes. Tomorrow, I would have to start making decisions about the rest of my life. But tonight, for the first time in weeks, I felt something approaching peace. The marriage might be over, but I was finally free from the constant anxiety of wondering what financial disaster was waiting around the corner. I was free to rebuild my emergency fund without worrying that someone would spend it on designer bags. I was free to plan for the future without someone sabotaging those plans with impulsive purchases. It wasn't the future I'd planned, but it was a future I could control. And after weeks of chaos, control felt like the most valuable thing in the world. 3 months later, the divorce papers were final. Sarah kept the apartment. Her parents had indeed helped her with the rent, just as I'd expected they would. I found a small 1-bedroom place closer to work and began rebuilding my life piece by piece. The emergency fund was back up to $8,000. I was sleeping through the night again, and I'd learned something valuable about myself. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away from someone whose values are fundamentally incompatible with your own. Sarah had taught me that love without financial compatibility is just an expensive form of friendship. And friendship, however loving, isn't enough to build a marriage on. The watch had been the final piece of evidence I needed. not because of its cost, but because of what it represented. A person who would never understand that security matters more than luxury, that trust matters more than gifts, and that some mistakes reveal character rather than momentary poor judgment. I never saw Sarah again after the divorce was finalized, but I heard through mutual friends that she'd moved back to Seattle to be closer to her parents. I hoped she was happy. I hoped she'd learned something from our marriage, just as I had. But mostly, I was grateful to have learned the difference between someone you love and someone you can build a life with. Sometimes they're the same person, and sometimes they're not. The emergency fund grew steadily, month by month, dollar by dollar. And this time I was the only one who knew the account numbers.